Admiral Nimitz attempted to commit Enterprise and Hornet to support USS Lexington and USS Yorktown against Japanese forces involved in Operation Mo. However, the close timing between the Doolittle raid and the eventual Battle of the Coral Sea prevented Enterprise and Hornet from being able to take part in the battle in early May 1942. 54. Additional perspectives. Doolittle recounted in his autobiography that at the time he thought the mission was a failure, and he would be demoted upon return to the U.S. 55. This mission showed that a B-25 takeoff from a carrier was easier than previously thought, and night operations could be possible in the future. Shuttle bombing runs, taking off and landing at different air bases, were shown to be an effective carrier task force tactic since there was no need for the ships to wait for the returning aircraft. 55. The American pilots, instead of landing as planned, were forced to bail out due to a lack of ground lighting to provide guidance. Chinese airfield crews recounted that, due to the unexpected early arrival of the B-25s, homing beacon and runway torch lights were not on for fear of possible Japanese airstrikes, as had happened previously. If Claire Lee Chennault had been informed of the mission specifics, the outcome might have been very much better for the Americans. Chennault had built an effective air surveillance net in China that would have been able to provide updated arrival information about the raiders to the airfield crews, and could have confirmed that there was no risk of Japanese airstrikes, allowing the landing lights to be lit at the time necessary to allow safe landings. 55. Chiang Kai-shek awarded the raiders China's highest military decorations, 56, and predicted in his diary that Japan would alter its goals and strategy as a result of the disgrace. Note 11. Indeed, the raid was a shock to staff at Japanese Imperial General Headquarters. As a direct consequence, Japan attacked territories in China to prevent similar shuttle bombing runs. High Command withdrew substantial Air Force resources from supporting offensive operations in order to defend the home islands. The Aleutian Islands campaign was launched to prevent the U.S. from using the islands as bomber bases to attack Japan. This required two carriers that otherwise would have been used for the Battle of Midway. Thus, the raid's most significant strategic accomplishment was that it compelled the Japanese High Command into ordering a very inefficient disposition of their forces and poor decision-making due to fear of attack for the rest of the war. 57. Mitsuo Fuchida and Shigeyoshi Miwa considered the one-way raid excellent strategy, with the bombers evading Army fighters by flying much lower than anticipated. Kurashima said the raid passed like a shiver over Japan, and Miwa criticized the Army for claiming to have shot down 9 aircraft rather than not even 1. 58. Effect. Duration, 9 minutes and 38 seconds. 9:38. 1943 U.S. newsreel about the raid. Compared with the future devastating Boeing B-29 Superfortress attacks against Japan, the Doolittle raid did little material damage, and all of it was easily repaired. Preliminary reports stated 12 were killed and more than 100 were wounded. 8 primary and 5 secondary targets were struck. In Tokyo, the targets included an oil tank farm, a steel mill, and several power plants. In Yokosuka, at least one bomb from the B-25 piloted by 1st LT. Edgar E. McElroy struck the nearly completed light carrier Ryuho 37, delaying her launch until November. 6 schools and an army hospital were also hit. Japanese officials reported the 2 aircraft whose crews were captured had struck their targets. 60. Letter of gratitude to the Doolittle raiders by the government of the Republic of China, and signed by Sung Mei-ling, 1942. Allied ambassadors and staff in Tokyo were still interned until agreement was reached about their repatriation via the neutral port of Lourenço Marques in Portuguese East Africa in July 1942. When Joseph Grew, U.S., realized the low-flying planes overhead were American, not Japanese planes on maneuvers, He thought they may have flown from the Aleutian Islands. The Japanese press claimed that 9 had been shot down, but there were no pictures of crashed planes. Embassy staff were very happy and proud, and the British said that they drank toasts all day to the American flyers. 61. Sir Robert Craigie, the interned British ambassador to Japan who was under house arrest in Tokyo at the time, said that Japanese staff had been amused at the embassy's air raid precautions, as the idea of an attack on Tokyo was laughable with the Allies in retreat, but the guards now showed considerable excitement and perturbation. Several false alarms followed, and in poorer districts people rushed into the streets shouting and gesticulating, losing their normal iron control over their emotions and showing a tendency to panic. The police guards on Allied and neutral missions were doubled to foil reprisal attacks, and the guard on the German mission was tripled. 62. Despite the minimal damage inflicted, American morale, still reeling from the attack on Pearl Harbor and Japan's subsequent territorial gains, soared when news of the raid was released. 63. The Japanese press was told to describe the attack as a cruel, indiscriminate bombing against civilians, including women and children. After the war, the casualty count was 87 dead, 151 serious injuries, and more than 311 minor injuries. Children were among those killed, and newspapers asked their parents to share their opinion on how the captured raiders should be treated. 59. The Japanese Navy attempted to locate and pursue the American task force. The Second Fleet, its main striking force, was near Formosa, returning from the Indian Ocean raid to refit and replace its air losses. Spearheaded by 5 aircraft carriers and its best naval aircraft and aircrews, the Second Fleet was immediately ordered to locate and destroy the U.S. carrier force, but failed to do so, due to the American fleet choosing to head back to Hawaii. Had they stayed after all, they would have found themselves attacked by the carriers Akagi, Soryu, and Huryu. 64-65 Nagumo and his staff on Akagi heard that an American force was near Japan, but expected an attack on the next day. The Imperial Japanese Navy also bore a special responsibility for allowing an American aircraft carrier force to approach the Japanese home islands in a manner similar to the IJN fleet to Hawaii in 1941, and permitting it to escape undamaged. Note 12. The fact that medium, normally land-based bombers carried out the attack confused the IJN's high command. This confusion and the knowledge that Japan was now vulnerable to air attacks strengthened Yamamoto's resolve to destroy the American carrier fleet, which was not present in the Pearl Harbor attack, resulting in a decisive Japanese defeat several weeks later at the Battle of Midway. 67. It was hoped that the damage done would be both material and psychological. Material damage was to be the destruction of specific targets with ensuing confusion and retardation of production. The psychological results, it was hoped, would be the recalling of combat equipment from other theaters for home defense, thus affecting relief in those theaters, the development of a fear complex in Japan, improved relationships with our allies, and a favorable reaction on the American people. General James H. Doolittle, 9 July 1942, 68. After the raid, the Americans were worried in April about the still very badly undermanned West Coast, and Chief of Staff George Marshall discussed a possible attack by the Japanese upon our plants in San Diego, and then a flight by those Japs down into Mexico after they have made their attack. So Secretary Stimson asked State to touch base with their people south of the border, and Marshall flew to the West Coast on 22 May, 69. An unusual consequence of the raid came after when, in the interests of secrecy, President Roosevelt answered a reporter's question by saying that the raid had been launched from Shangri-La, 7071, the fictional faraway land of the James Hilton novel Lost Horizon. The true details of the raid were revealed to the public 1 year later, in April 1943. 72. The Navy, in 1944, commissioned the Essex-class aircraft carrier USS Shangri-La, with Doolittle's wife Josephine as the sponsor. After the war, members of the Doolittle Raid at the 15th anniversary reunion at Fort Walton Beach, Florida, in 1957. WWII Army veteran George A. McAlpin, Wright, talking to LT. Call Richard E. Cole seated, about McAlpin's cousin, Raider SGT. William Billy Jack Dieter, at the 66th anniversary reunion at the University of Texas at Dallas in April 2008. External videos. Video icon panel discussion with William Bauer, Richard E. Cole, Thomas Griffin, Edwin Horton, and C.V. Glines, 10 November 2006, C-SPAN. The Doolittle Raiders held an annual reunion almost every year from the late 1940s to 2013. The high point of each reunion was a solemn, private ceremony in which the surviving Raiders performed a roll call, then toasted their fellow Raiders who had died during the previous year. Specially engraved silver goblets, one for each of the 80 Raiders, were used for this toast. The goblets of those who had died were inverted. Each Raider's name was engraved on his goblet both right side up and upside down. The Raiders drank a toast using a bottle of cognac that accompanied the goblets to each Raider reunion. 73. In 2013, the remaining Raiders decided to hold their last public reunion at Fort Walton Beach, Florida, not far from Eglin Air Force Base, where they trained for the original mission. The bottle and the goblets had been maintained by the United States Air Force Academy on display in Arnold Hall, the Cadet Social Center, until 2006. On 19 April 2006, these memorabilia were transferred to the National Museum of the United States Air Force at Wright-Patterson AFB, Ohio. 74. On 18 April 2013, a final reunion for the surviving Raiders was held at Eglin Air Force Base, with Robert Height the only survivor unable to attend. 75. The final toast to fallen comrades by the surviving Raiders took place at the NMUSAF on 9 November 2013, preceded by a B-25 flyover, and was attended by Richard Cole, Edward Saylor, and David Thatcher. 76. 7 other men, including L.T. Miller and Raider historian Carl V. Glines, are considered honorary Raiders for their efforts for the mission. 6. The Children of the Doolittle Raiders organization was founded on 18 April 2006, authorized by the Doolittle Raiders organization and the surviving members at the time. Descendants of the Doolittle Raiders organize fundraisers for a scholarship fund and continue to organize the Doolittle Raiders reunions. The 2019 reunion was held at Lt. Col. Richard E. Cole's Memorial Service. 77. Last surviving airman. Col. Bill Bauer, the last surviving Doolittle Raider aircraft commander, died on 10 January 2011 at age 93 in Boulder, Colorado. 7879. Lt. Col. Edward Saylor, the then-enlisted engineer-gunner of aircraft number 15 during the raid, died 28 January 2015 of natural causes at his home in Sumner, Washington, at the age of 94. 80. Lt. Col. Robert L. Height, co-pilot of aircraft number 16, died at a nursing home in Nashville, Tennessee, at the age of 95 on 29 March 2015. 8182 Height was the last living prisoner of the Doolittle Raid. S/SGT. David J. Thatcher, gunner of aircraft number 7, died on 22 June 2016 in Missoula, Montana, at the age of 94. Lt. Col. Richard E. Cole, Doolittle's co-pilot in aircraft number 1, was the last surviving Doolittle Raider 83, and the only one to live to an older age than Doolittle, who died in 1993 at age 96. Note 13. Cole was the only Raider still alive when the wreckage of Hornet was found in late January 2019 by the research vessel Petrel at a depth of more than 17,000 feet, 5,200 m, off the Solomon Islands. 84. Cole died 9 April 2019 at the age of 103. 85. Doolittle Raid exhibits. The most extensive display of Doolittle Raid memorabilia is at the National Museum of the United States Air Force on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. The centerpiece is a like-new B-25, which is painted and marked as Doolittle's aircraft, 42344, rebuilt by North American Aviation to B-25B configuration from an F-10D photo reconnaissance version of the B-25D. The bomber, which North American Aviation presented to the Raiders in 1958, rests on a reproduction of Hornet's flight deck. Several authentically dressed mannequins surround the aircraft, including representations of Doolittle Hornet Captain Mark Mitcher, and groups of Army and Navy men loading the bomber's bombs and ammunition. Also exhibited are the silver goblets used by the Raiders at each of their annual reunions, pieces of flight clothing and personal equipment, a parachute used by one of the Raiders in his bailout over China, and group photographs of all 16 crews and other items. The last B-25 to be retired from the U.S. Air Force inventory is displayed at the Air Force Armament Museum at Eglin AFB, also in the markings of Gen Doolittle's aircraft. 86. A fragment of the wreckage of one of the aircraft and the medals awarded to Doolittle are on display at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. The 2006 Pacific Aviation Museum Pearl Harbor on Ford Island, O2BB, HU, Hawaii, also has a 1942 exhibit in which the centerpiece is a restored B-25 in the markings of the ruptured duck used on the Doolittle Raid. 87. The San Marcos, Texas, chapter of the Commemorative Air Force has in its museum the armor plate from the pilot's seat of the B-25 Doolittle flew in the raid. The interchange of Edmond Highway, South Carolina 302, and Interstate 26 nearest the former Columbia Army Air Base is designated the Doolittle Raiders Interchange. In China, a memorial hall honoring the Doolittle Raiders and the Chinese who provided them with assistance in aftermath of the raid is located at the city of Jiangshan in Quizhou, Zhejiang. 8889. Doolittle exhibit aboard USS Hornet Museum, August 2015. A small exhibit about the Doolittle Raid exists, or used to, at the USS Hornet Museum in Alameda, California. Doolittle Raiders reenactment. The restored World War IIB-25 Heavenly Body taking off from the deck of Ranger. On 21 April 1992, in conjunction with other Department of Defense World War II 50th Anniversary commemorative events, two B-25 Mitchell bombers, B-25J Heavenly Body and B-25J In the Mood, were hoisted aboard USS Ranger. The bombers participated in a commemorative reenactment of the Doolittle Raid on Tokyo, taking off from Ranger's flight deck before more than 1,500 guests. 90. The launch took place off the coast of San Diego. 91 4B-25s were approved by the U.S. Navy for the reenactment with two selected. The other two participants were B-25J Executive Suite and B-25J Pacific Princess. Following the launch, 8 B-25s flew up the coast where General Doolittle and his son John P. Doolittle watched as each B-25 came in for a low pass, dropping 250 red, white, and blue carnations into the surf, concluding the event. Congressional Gold Medal. Doolittle Raiders LT. Col. Richard Cole, co-pilot of Crew No. 1 Wright and Staff SGT. David Thatcher, engineer gunner of Crew No. 7 with the Congressional Gold Medal, 2015. On 19 May 2014, the United States House of Representatives passed H.R. 1209 to award the Doolittle Raiders a Congressional Gold Medal for outstanding heroism, valor, skill, and service to the United States in conducting the bombings of Tokyo. 92-93. The award ceremony took place at the Capitol building on 15 April 2015, with retired Air Force Lieutenant General John Hudson, the director of the National Museum of the Air Force, accepting the award on behalf of the Doolittle Raiders. 94. Northrop Grumman B-21 Raider. In September 2016, the Northrop Grumman B-21 was formally named Raider in honor of the Doolittle Raiders. 95. The last surviving Doolittle Raider, retired LT Col Richard E. Cole, was present at the naming ceremony at the Air Force Association Conference. 96. The name is fitting since the Doolittle Raiders flew such a long distance, and the B-21 Raider is also intended to have an extremely long range. This is because it is designed for the Indo-Pacific theater, where ranges are very long. 97.